Welcome into the Just Basketball Show. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. Make sure you subscribe or follow on your podcast platform of choice. If you have not already, 5 stars only on those reviews, please. And then remember to subscribe, hit that notification bell on YouTube. Thanks again to Jake Stevens and Dillon Heiser for producing. Brendon, jam-packed show today. We're going to talk about Mike Budenholzer out in Milwaukee, what comes next for the Bucks, and we're going to whip around all these different series. We are recording this on Sunday at around noon Eastern time, 9 a.m.-ish local time for Brendon. So we're going to do the series that are going to happen later today. Games are going to happen later today. We're going to have those at the back end of the show, and we'll revisit them in kind of more detail later in the week. But Brendon, we're going to start with a game that I have. You have been the king on this show so far of coming up with games for us to do. So I decided that I needed to return the favor, and I'm going to spring this on you. I actually gave you the option for full transparency to the listeners and the viewers. Did you want to prep? Did you want to just wait? And you chose surprise. So here we go. I was thinking last night is what I'm watching Lakers Warriors, and I'm thinking, oh, here this is what I want to know. Let's have the listeners get to know us. Let's dive into something fun. Who would you, if you got there's celebrity row at these Laker games? There's like, everyone. Dustin Hoffman is there, Kevin Hart, Michael B. Jordan, Kim Kardashian. Like you have like Rich Paul and Adele sitting next to each other. I always love when it's like they zoom in on Adele and it's like the real heads know it's like Rich Paul's on his phone, like right next to Adele, and it's just like, yeah, this is the shout out to Clutch. Shout out to Jeff Siegel. Early bird rights forever. But got me thinking, if you got to like have your own celebrity row, 4 people you got to pick, 4 celebrities you got to pick to be in your celebrity row, who would they be? I'll give you a second to think about this. Here's mine. Number 1, Paul Thomas Anderson, my favorite film director. That's just me. You get you can count their partners, so I get Maya Rudolph in this as well. Okay, so I get Maya Rudolph in this as well. I'm picking Phoebe Bridgers, and by extension, I'm just taking all of Boy Genius. I'm really just extending this out. This is just very on brand for me, but we're just going Boy Genius. That counts as 1. I'm going to take Samuel L. Jackson because Samuel L. is just an icon, and just the energy he brings is one of 1. And to round out the sad boy foursome, well, actually, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to go Brie Larson. Big Brie Larson fan. There we go. That's my 4. PTA, Boy Genius, Samuel L., and Brie Larson. Paul Mescal, a cut. Got some others that are cuts, but that's my 4.
All right, so my head went immediately to people who actually go to NBA games. Not that yours don't, but I'm like, that's just where I jump. And some of them do, right? I mean, I'm sure Samuel L. Jackson has gone to games. I'm sure Paul Thomas
Phoebe
Anderson
Bridgers
has been
is just
in LA
like a
long enough.
Phoebe Bridgers? Well, actually, Julian Baker from Boy Genius is a noted Memphis Grizzlies fan. Yep. Big Grizzlies fan. I would like to know her takes on John Morant currently.
Yeah, podcast bucket list there for us.
Julian Baker. Can we talk about Dillon Brooks with Julian Baker?
Yeah, talking only Memphis Grizzlies. All right, so yeah. With that said, I'm going very much off the top of my head. I'm regretting not asking you to tell me this game sooner, but it's probably more fun this way. So, Adam Sandler.
Oh, good one.
Spike Lee, just legend, has to be on the list. I'm really tempted to say, I'll do it. Jack Nicholson. I just think.
Oh, love it.
He's on the murderer's row. He's on the the legend list. He's on the Hall of Fame. I'm trying to come up with a musician last, so I'm just going to go Tyler, the Creator. I think that would be a very weird addition to that foursome and would be a very funny presence on the side of a court. I don't know what types of things he would be liable to heckle players with. I don't know if he would even care enough to stay the whole game. It's a nice mix-up and sort of reaction, like a science class thing that just sort of explodes all over the place and the kids have to clean it up. I think that's what I'm setting up for myself here with those 4. But they might also get along, and they all seem to love basketball. So there we go.
The one that I actually regret not putting in here, as you said, Tyler Creator, is I think I'm going to swap out Brie Larson for Jay-Z.
Oh, good call.
Yeah. So Dillon, you're going to have to. Here's my 4 again: PTA, The King, Boy Genius, Samuel L. Jackson, and Jay-Z. That's my celebrity row. That's who I want. Jay-Z just feels like he should just be at like all the big NBA games. Like it feels like right when you get Jayson courtside, Jay and Beyonce if possible.
I gotta complain a
Although
little bit here. I feel like so there were a lot of big media heavy hitters, like Shams was at Suns Nuggets game 3 the other night, and Amin El Hassan, and we got a bunch of ESPN people and whatever. So like the media comes out, but no one cares about that. The Nuggets don't bring the celebrities out. I really think it has to be the Nuggets. Like, I hate to do that. They're up 2-1. They might be up 3-1 by the time anyone's listening to this show, but it was a little disappointing. They did like the close-ups, and like Odell Beckham lives in Phoenix in the offseason, and so he was at the game, but that's old news. The best they could do was some rapper that I genuinely had not heard of. That was like the highlight of the game. On a Friday night in the second round with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker playing, and it's like, I don't even remember the dude. I think it was like some 90s rapper from a group that was like in a one-hit wonder, and I already forgot. Okay. So the Nuggets need to do better. The NBA fandom world needs to appreciate Nikola Jokic and fly to Phoenix for this stuff, because we're getting outpaced by Miami and New York and LA and San Francisco. We can't keep up.
Well, the last thing we'll say about this is this year, Machine Gun Kelly is like this very famous Cleveland person that polarizing, but like I don't know why it didn't happen or like what the deal was, but like the fact that he and Megan Fox were not courtside for like one big game was like was an L to me. You gotta nail that one down. Like I don't know how this is with Cardinals players, but like if Myles Garrett is at a Browns game, he will get like put on the jumbotron like 500 bajillion times. They didn't do it with Deshaun Watson when he was there during a playoff game. Wonder why that is. Wonder about that. That might be an awkward interaction. But like they'll pan to Myles Garrett if Nick Chubb's able to do it. Terry Francona if he comes over on his scooter. But like they didn't get MGK and Megan Fox, and like I just felt like that was a mistake.
You got to be resourceful.
You got to get that one. Yeah,
you got to do the best with what
you have. Pay for the flight. You got to pay for the flight, bring him in for, like, overnight. He has a coffee shop in the city. Like, come on.
L.
Messed that up. All right, Brendan. Yeah, L. Big L. But let's go on to the real basketball stuff. Let's start with Coach Bud. Mike Budenholzer out in Milwaukee. This is where I go with this. This is where I go more than anything else. The Bucks have to nail this. Mm-hmm. This is a hire that they have to get right. This is the hire that is going to set the tone for the next couple of years with Giannis. I don't know exactly who the right person is, but I feel like there are some options. There are a lot of different paths they could go here. But this is a hire. There's the Giannis contract extension stuff coming up. This roster is going to be really hard to shake up. That, to me, is probably the biggest part of all of this. I get why you fire, but I don't totally know if it's like a guaranteed like fixes everything for you. I don't really think that's like in play, or maybe a new voice does help. But this is the hire that is going to dictate what the next couple years look like for the Bucks in a lot of ways.
It is, of course. Giannis is up for an extension in September, which I know the captain, the king of who's up for extensions when, the one and only Brian Windhorst, I feel like is the only person that I've ever heard talking about that. But once I heard him say it, I was like, that's interesting. That's pretty big. Not that he's a free agent this summer, but even just having the eligibility to sign an extension is always one of those milestone checkpoint moments for a player and their relationship to their team. And so I would imagine that the Bucks did this in large part knowing that was going to be a pivotal moment, and knowing that there's a lot of pressure to continue to win. And I don't even think that it's a pressure from Giannis. I mean, obviously, right, we just heard the whole fallout from the failure versus not failure debate and everything else, and I don't think that he's the type of guy who will look at, we got out in the second round without Middleton in 2022, and then obviously the first round this year, and feel like the Bucks failed him. I think he's the type of dude who's always going to look internally, but bigger picture, this is an old roster, and I think that's really the main sort of thing. And I know a lot of Bucks people that I've seen around is basically this idea that it has to operate in tandem. Whatever they choose to do with Bud replacing Bud is going to have a large role to play in what they do with the roster, and finding ideally a coach who can maybe do more with less here, I think is going to be pretty important too, because they don't have a lot of means to continue to upgrade, right? And so that all leaves you with, I think the fundamental question here, Chris, is basically who are the coaches that make sense? And more specifically, there's always this debate, and I wonder where you fall on it, of when you have, and this is always the question with LeBron teams, because his coaches tend to get fired a lot. Do you have to bring someone in with pedigree, right? Do you have to bring someone in who's won a championship or been around a lot? Or do you try to find the great up-and-comer? Do you try to go with somebody who's actually more likely to maximize what it is that the players are doing on the court? Or do you try to go towards somebody who is going to get along well with Giannis, demand the respect of the locker room, and get through to and connect with this veteran group? I have my thoughts, but that's a pretty basic question. I think that's going to illustrate kind of where Milwaukee wants to go here, because we haven't seen them hire a coach for 5 years. We don't really know how they feel.
I think the way to start with that question is to run through the names. You have Charles Lee, who's an in-house assistant, who's a finalist for the Pistons job. If you're going to bet on continuity and someone Giannis knows and John Horst knows and understands this roster, you could go to Charles Lee. I think Frank Vogel should be on this list. This is a guy that won a title. I think is one of the most sound, technical, proven winning coaches we have in the NBA. I think he would make a ton of sense if you want that steady hand. Doesn't seem to have like the pedigree of like the biggest coaches, but is a really, really good coach who just won a title in LA. And then you have like Nick Nurse. And I don't know if this is the right fit for Nick Nurse, personality-wise. I don't know if that's the way I'm going if I'm Milwaukee. But I think those are kind of emblematic of the three ways you could go here. You have the in-house up-and-comer. You have the real tactician guy kind of in Nurse, at least defensively, who has a very strong persona. And then you have Frank Vogel, who is definitely different from Bud, but feels kind of like an evolution of Bud, a guy who knows what he's doing, is really competent, and you know exactly what you're getting out of him. Where I would go, Brennan, is I think Vogel would make a ton of sense. I think if you're looking at – I don't think Nurse makes sense for this. What he wanted to do in Toronto does not like apply one-to-one to me of what exists in Milwaukee. And like I don't really like this roster is so old that I don't know if a coach who has loved to play his guys like these insane minute totals makes a ton of sense. I just don't think it does. Maybe he could adjust. Maybe a new, it could make some sense there. But I don't like love this fit, that fit between like what Milwaukee is and what Nick Nurse is. I think Charles Lee, if you really want to bet, I can't speak to like. The assistants when we're talking about this is like to me is always very hard because like you read press clippings, I really miss that Kevin Arnovitz column before he went into screenwriting where he kind of ran down the list of assistants. That was always such a useful piece of journalism to me in understanding who the big names were. But it seems like he's very well thought of. Also, Darvin Ham was in that case last year, and I don't know if there is a transition. Like Darvin Ham has had a transition in adjusting to being a head coach with the Lakers. Like it could be a lot to ask of Charles Lee to just step into that and nail it right off the bat with so much pressure on the line. That is where I go to Vogel. The principles are sound. He's won. He knows what he's doing. Maybe I don't know what that looks like for your assistants. I don't know what Giannis wants as well. That probably should factor into this and could factor into this, I'm sure. Maybe there's someone we're not thinking of here. Does Becky, do they like go reach out to Becky Hammond and try to lure her away from the Aces? I doubt that's going to happen. Does like Doc Rivers get fired in Philly and they go the Doc route for whatever reason? Like does D'Antoni throw his name into the mix or something here? Like I think there are different ways this could go. But to me, when I think about the names, about who we actually understand, Vogel to me just would make a lot of sense based on a pedigree standpoint and based on just like this feels like a fair way to handle like we need to maximize right now with someone who actually is going to be we don't have any doubts are going to be able to handle what's kind of coming in front of them.
Yeah, it's really a matter of floor versus ceiling, I think, with some of this, right? Where I think that the opportunities that you get when you go for somebody who maybe is a little bit more adventurous and creative from an X's and O's standpoint, is going to try different things, is going to put different lineups out there, is going to reinvent the wheel a little bit with how the team plays. That's obviously a higher ceiling because you're talking about a team that's been very good, but maybe can get to great, or can get the most out of the role players in a way that they didn't before and some of these things. But it's a low floor because there's a very strong chance that even somebody like Charles Lee for the Bucks, right, to be more specific about this exact ownership or this exact coaching staff, is there's a chance that they just don't demand or get the respect from the star players, and it really blows up, right? Like, I think in Phoenix, I had this experience with Igor Kokoshkov, right? He was the right-hand man to Quinn Snyder for a long time, got hired. It was a bunch of hullabaloo because he was the first, non-European-born head coach in the NBA, and he was a really smart tactician. He had coached Luka, and then they didn't draft him. Different story for a different day. And then all of a sudden, it's like he just cannot get through to this locker room. And that wasn't even a star locker room. That was a bunch of kids, and he couldn't even, really get them to be aligned. So that's kind of what you're talking about. But I'm always going to lean toward the assistants, personally. I'm always going to lean toward who's the next really smart person in the league. And you just have to trust that your interview process gets a good enough understanding of what they're going to be able to bring as leaders. Because that's hard to measure anyway. You're always taking a little bit of a coin toss, right? But I just look at what Milwaukee is, and I don't feel like Frank Vogel offensively. I don't know what is he going to do for that team that hasn't already been done. You know what I mean? It feels like a little bit of status quo, and I don't think that's what they need. I do think that they need a little bit of a shakeup. I think that they need to maybe play a little bit differently. I think that bringing some different personnel in there and trying to reimagine what can a team be around Giannis at its absolute best. I think more shooting. I think a little bit more creativity with the offense. And I think a little bit, honestly, less protection on defense. I know that not having wing defenders, young athletic wing defenders, was a really big problem for them in that Miami series. They didn't have an answer for Jimmy that wasn't, Drew, who he very clearly figured out, and then Middleton, who was a little bit cooked injury-wise, that they didn't have like a third option there who really was going to make any sense. That's a personnel thing, but I feel like a coach who's going to be able to develop a defense that takes a little bit more advantage of like, hey, we have Giannis Antetokounmpo on our team. You know what I mean? Like, that should mean something. We shouldn't have to have size at every position all the time and kind of this very carefully protected type of thing. If Giannis is a superstar, which he is, then why are we kind of insulating him so much with the lineups and the way we play? That's kind of how I feel. I think as these teams age, as these like great teams age, you kind of have to get to that next level of like, the superstar has to do more. And it's fine. He can. So let's find a coach who's going to be able to get the most out of the other guys rather than trying to protect, the best guy. I know that's a little bit of an oversimplification of what Bud was doing, but that's kind of where I would be looking. So whether that's Charles Lee or somebody like a few who come to mind are like Johnny Bryant, who we've talked about. He's with the Knicks, has really helped Tibbs evolve as a coach himself. Jordi Fernandez, who I know you're familiar with because he was in Cleveland staff, but he was also with the Nuggets for a long time, and then now has gone on to brighter lights. And then Dan Craig, who he was with Miami forever, and he was a guy who you would hear get interviewed a ton, and then all of a sudden stopped getting interviews. But he was with Miami during a lot of the LeBron years, and then even beyond that. And now he's been the associate head coach for Ty Lue with the Clippers for quite a while as well. So those are some names that I would look at. But it's a bummer we don't have that Arnovitz article anymore, because that was always fun to see. Is what's the intel on like what the league thinks of a lot of these guys, because we don't have any idea. We're kind of just guessing from the outside.
Yeah, hopefully, I assume Arnovitz, because he's a screenwriter now, is like striking with the WGA. So solidarity with the writers on strike here from the Just Basketball show. That's where I go with that. But I really wonder what Giannis thinks and what is going through his head right now. And I think really the biggest thing here, Brendan, to me, and I think you hit this as well, is I really just think this roster is just going to be tricky. This roster needs a reshuffling. This roster there's not like a lot of avenues to reshuffle it and make it youthful. Like, what does Middleton do is such a big thing. You go into like real tax situations, assuming he's back. Like, Brook Lopez is a free agent and he's at 35, and like, how many years can you really be sure that Brook Lopez is going to be that level, right? Like that to me is a real part of this. And
that one's such a hard one, because losing him for nothing would just be brutal. But also you can't do it. You can't do it. I think it's one of those. You think it's like a 1 or 2 year type of thing where it's like we're not going to move on, but we don't really like want to commit to you either.
Maybe like 2 years with like a partial guarantee. So like if you needed to, you could like trade it and like at least have the matching salary. Like I don't know what the right path is here for them. Like, this is going to be really hard, and maybe it doesn't matter because you have maybe the best player in the world. Like maybe that like just kind of supersedes all this if you nail this coaching hire. It's such a fascinating situation. I don't think there's like a perfect answer. If you had to, I haven't looked at I bet MGM or anywhere for odds, but if you could tell John Horst who you would pick, who I said Vogel, who would you actually just pick if you're gonna pick right now?
I think I want to just mention too. You brought him up, but Darvin Ham, the what if kind of game if Bud did get fired previous to this season and they were able to just hire Darvin Ham to replace him. Not only we know that Giannis had a really deep connection with him from all the reporting that's out there, but also the fact that then he doesn't go to the Lakers, and then who do the Lakers hire? And then they've had some success with their coaching change, and he's gotten Anthony Davis to buy in as a center and all this different stuff. You feel like he would have been a really good answer here, and that sucks. But
yes,
I would probably go Johnny Bryant. It's just kind of based off of nothing. Again, I'm not anywhere near like plugged in enough to any of this to know that he has those leadership qualities that you're going to want, but I just think he has the experience scheming at a really high level for a pretty long time in the playoffs and has had a bunch of different opportunities to be really good at it. So I would probably go him, or I would just go to Charles Lee, who was in the Arnovitz thing last year. It says here, colleagues marvel at his ability to relate to everyone, tactical intelligence. He was a trader on Wall Street prior to being an NBA coach, which is insane. If they say if he had played a minute in the NBA or had any connection to the NBA outside of being a coach, he would have already gotten hired, and it's sort of just an experience thing. But if I'm the Bucks, I'm not making the Darvin Ham mistake twice, and that would be my kind of number two.
I dig it. I'm fascinated to see how this comes, and I wonder how long they wait. That is the other part of this. I really do wonder how long they wait through all this, and we'll see in the coming days. All right. Let's move on to checking in on different series. Brendan, let's start with Lakers-Warriors. And we're going to try to talk through the series in sort of through certain prisms, through certain angles of these series. And with the Lakers-Warriors, Brendan, I want to talk about LeBron James. A friend of the program, who I'd like to have on at some point, actually I've told him I'd want to have him on, is friend of the pod, Bill DiFilippo. Love you, Bill. He had a tweet that I think sums this up pretty well of where I'm at with LeBron. He tweeted this late on Saturday. So wild, Bill wrote, that LeBron said, I went to a bunch of doctors until one told me what I wanted to hear about my foot injury, which probably needs surgery. And everyone went, sure, that sounds like LeBron, and he's playing right now and looks pretty fine. This was like a weird LeBron game in Game 3. He didn't take a field goal in the first quarter. He was not doing anything. Like, it was weird. And then it's like, are we actually in this different point of LeBron? And I think we are to some degree. He's 38. He's played 20 seasons, all of the minutes, all of the playoff runs, the foot injury, all of that has accumulated. And then it's like, oh, there he is. Mm-hmm. There's, to me, the greatest player that has ever played professional basketball. He dominates stretches of this game. He is attacking. He's running around tipping passes. He just turns it on when he needed to, and he's picking his spots in a really extreme way. We're definitely in a different phase. We're definitely in a thing. But then he has plays where, like in the third, he has that spin and drive, and then he blocks a shot on the other end. This fucking guy, even if he's not peak LeBron anymore, is just going to be here doing this shit. Like, It's just, it's not full games anymore, but he's still going to have these stretches where it's like, oh, yeah, he's him. He is the king.
It sort of feels like he has learned from the past, because this is sort of where he's been since the bubble, right? In terms of some of this really needing to pick your spots, not being able to do it full go for the entirety of a game, not being able to do the 45, 15, and 5 in 2012 type of thing anymore. And it almost feels like what we're seeing this year, the team is a lot better around him, so that allows him to do it. But it's like he's watched himself figure out and feel out where he can impact the game, and it's almost like he's ready for this playoff run in a way that he wouldn't have been if they had needed it from him 3 years ago. And I'm kind of ready to just sit back and appreciate it, because even the version of this dude to me who has the highest IQ in the NBA and sometimes is just kind of playing like the best role player in the league, is still pretty awesome and incredible to watch, and still one of one, still unique, and impacts the game. I'm not going to say at the level that he used to. I'm not going to say that he's been the best player in this series, but I'll say in the best possible way that it feels like he's capable of. And I'm just inclined to trust that he knows his body and his mind well enough to know that this is probably the best we're going to get of him, and he's figuring out a way to give it his best still. That, like, there is something to be said for that, because again, this dude is 38 and a half years old. Like, it's not really fair to hold him up to his former standard. And if you hold him up to the standard of what it seems like his approach is, I feel like he's at 95% of what he's trying to do. And I mean, man, like, they're winning. So how are you going to take it away from him?
The Warriors, when he was going at stuff, like, did not have an answer for him. And it was funny because I was watching the first half, and it's like he had a drive on Moses Moody that is, like, seared into my brain. Because I think if it was 2018 or 2019 even, or in the bubble, like, any time before like this, it's a dunk. Moody is too small to defend him. Moody is too small to stop bully ball LeBron. That is like a level of his game he really unlocked, like, in Cleveland the second time around, that he has turned to a ton. And, like, we talk about the three-point shooting, and that really is obviously has been an issue for months now with the foot. But he would have this bully ball thing, and like that is what really helped him kind of attack the Warriors. It was a big part of what worked for Cleveland was LeBron bully ball and the physicality. He couldn't do that for stretches, and then he just kind of can when he needs to. I think, Brendan, it could be enough to win the series. The Lakers are not favorites to win this series at the books I've looked at.
Such a missed opportunity from the Warriors in Game 3.
Yeah, Clay came out really hot. Clay came out like they had some stuff that really worked. Draymond's foul trouble, I think, certainly played a part in the lack of rhythm.
19 turnovers. Didn't help.
Yeah, that helps. The Lakers have a huge free throw advantage in this series. The Lakers, I think, could very well win the series. But I wonder a little bit, is this version of LeBron enough to carry this team exactly where he wants to go? And it still feels like they're going to need a lot of AD, who is much better in Game 3 than he was in Game 4, or Game 2, excuse me. But is this LeBron, this guy who's like has his spurts, is that going to be enough for them to get to where he really is trying to get to? That is one of my open questions as we kind of look ahead here a little bit.
Yeah, the Lakers are getting outscored by 20 points per 100 possessions with LeBron on the court in the playoffs. Isn't that crazy? I mean,
it's bizarre. That is like the sign of anything that we are just this is a new world, a new era.
Yeah, they're plus 37 per 100 possessions with Anthony Davis on, and minus 20 with LeBron on. It's wild, and I think it speaks to not just LeBron, but also how good Davis has been. But the weird thing about this is it's really just a frequency thing, right? It's really like a picking his spots thing, because he's still shooting 72% at the rim and 51% from mid-range in the playoffs. And I think he's shooting like low 30s from three, but it's not like he's ever been a 45% three-point shooter anyway. So it's just mostly that he's settling for jumpers, and he's not taking as many shots, period. And so that's why the impact is sort of mitigated. And then we know how that sets up his other stuff. When he's able to drive, then that gets him to the free throw line. That gets the shooters involved. That slows the game down, all the types of impacts that it has. This was really like a vintage defensive performance from him in a lot of the ways, though. And so I guess when you ask, is this enough for them to get where they want to go? I mean, it basically is Anthony Davis needs to be a hero on offense, right? They need to continue to create turnovers. They need to continue to get to the free throw line. And then they need to have at least one of the other guys go off every night, which that recipe has worked. It's a very weird thing to have a lot of unreliable guys who add up to like 0.75 of a reliable guy on any given night. But it's whether it's Russell or Reeves or Hachimura or Schroeder, it feels like one of those four dudes is going to at least give you 20. In any given playoff game. And when you add that up with everything else, and as long as Davis has it going, that feels good enough to win. It's a very weird type of thing, but I think it also speaks to how wide open this conference is and how much parity there is around the league that might be enough, at least to get to the conference finals. I think the Nuggets would be a pretty difficult matchup for them, but I think, I'm with you. I mean, they're up 2-1. It'd be kind of crazy to say they couldn't win this series.
AD, one of the things that was most impressive to me about Game 3, Brendan, aside from the LeBron stuff, is I understand he has the real shooting issues. And he missed a ton of open corner threes in this game, and that is just really hard. But one of the things that I came away most impressed by was how Vando and AD, when they're on the floor together, are both of these really smart, know how to switch kind of without having to call out the switch guys. There's stretches where AD is he knows he has to defend Curry, and he can stick with him to get him back onto a guard so he can go back to where he's going to be. And Vando is just kind of naturally switching between these different things to stay in front of shooters. And obviously there are cracks. Clay is just going to take whatever looks he can get that open up in front of him. Steph's going to go off at some point. They're going to figure stuff out because they're the Warriors. But those two guys are on the floor together, I think, are giving them these really, really great defensive minutes. And AD, again, was just sensational on defense. Also, we have to probably give some respect to D'Angelo Russell, who was kind of the offensive star. He had a really, really nice first quarter, and maybe not the I'm not the biggest D'Lo guy, but he is what he's doing for this team makes sense within the context of this team. That it's a good place for D'Lo to be.
Yeah, he kept them afloat because that first quarter was when the Warriors were really humming, and I don't know how many he had. I think all of his points were in the first half of this game, which is very D'Angelo Russell. But
LeBron wasn't doing anything, so
exactly.
It's okay, you'll take it.
Yeah, you'll take it. And then the second and third quarter was really when the Lakers put the clamps on, started forcing a bunch of turnovers. LeBron's getting out in transition as an offensive and defensive player, making a difference. Anthony Davis is swatting everything in his sight, and they hold the Warriors to 38 points in the middle two quarters, and they score 63. So that was about all you needed. But without that Russell performance, it's like I was saying, they need one of those four dudes to step up and give you 15 to 25, whatever it might be, on any given night, and they've been getting that. In this case, it was Russell.
Where are you? We'll hit on the Warriors. Anything on their side pop to you? Anything concerning? Anything that would give you optimism for Game 4?
I mean, it's the same thing we've been talking about with I think all along, right? They need that consistent secondary scoring aside from Steph. And in Game 2, he was able to be used as a little bit of a facilitator, and Clay got hot, and so that was enough. But they don't have it consistently. They don't have that secondary scoring, and so there's going to be some games where it's 97 points. I know if they don't turn the ball over, maybe things are a little bit different, but Jordan Poole was good in Game 1. Hasn't been as good since. DiVincenzo apparently just going cold at the absolute wrong time. And we talked about Gary Payton, who used to be a little bit of a factor in their offense and just absolutely isn't anymore. So I don't know. Maybe there is, a Kevon Looney game in there somewhere where he can have a real difference-making performance like he did in Game 1. But if that can come back, that could swing a game. But really it's Wiggins and Clay getting open and making especially their threes, but, just scoring in whatever way they can. They're not really a heavy free throw team. This is a limited offense. That's what it's been all year. They just have to kind of do enough to survive and advance, I think, at this point in the year.
If you had to, do you favor one team or the other right now?
I think the Warriors should have won that game last night, and I think if they had, you would have felt like they were going to cruise to the win. So these things flip quickly. I wouldn't surprise me if they won Game 4, and this was still a long series. Warriors in 5, which was my stupid/bold prediction. Obviously, that's off the table now, but I would probably still lean Warriors just because I haven't seen anything so dramatic. But the Lakers they're the more, I guess, cohesive team. They have an identity, even though it's a little bit of a creaky identity that's not super reliable, but it's worked for them against two really good opponents. So I guess, they have the lead right now. They're favored.
All right, let's move on. Heat Knicks. We're going to talk about Kevin Love. Brendan, how would you I sent you some texts on Saturday. How would you describe what the things that my tone in talking about Kevin Love at this current moment in time?
Somewhere between discouraged and apoplectic.
That feels right. That feels right. So look, Kevin Love is not all NBA anymore or anything. This is not Apex Kevin Love anymore. But what Kevin Love is doing is contributing to playoff winning basketball repeatedly. He is boxing out. He is creating problems for Mitchell Robinson as like a stretch out five and pulling Mitchell Robinson out of the paint. I don't think that the Knicks are really attacking him in the way I would have expected. Like he's hedging on pick and rolls because him dropping is death for the Heat defense. But like they're not like making him hedge a couple times and trying to create leverage in those spots. Brendan, he didn't hit a three in their Game 3 win, and yet he's still plus 12 in additive. This guy has like gone in and he's contributed to basketball. He's fit in with the quote-unquote Heat culture, hashtag Heat culture. And he's helping a team that is like, I think should be pretty favored to win the series at this point. I understand he's like, you can look at it and say, oh, he's not hitting threes. And like, I got some pushback from Cavs people, Cavs Twitter people about how he's playing. But like, I don't know how you can't watch him and think that this guy isn't like playing actual helpful playoff basketball right now. Like he just is, and it's working. And like, he's not getting ripped off the court. This is emblematic of just what the Heat are. Like they're just finding solutions over and over and over again, and Kevin Love is one of their real solutions here.
Yeah, I think I measure it the same way as you, which is if you're able to stay on the court for a team that's winning, I'm going to defer to you're doing something right? I know they don't have a lot of options. They're down Tyler Hero and Victor Oladipo. They didn't have a very deep or trustworthy roster to begin with. You know, you're talking about Haywood Highsmith and some of these guys who would have to be stepping in place of Love. They are getting outscored by 4 points per 100 possessions with him on the court. So I guess that has to factor in here. But they are also getting outscored when Jimmy Butler is on the court in this series somehow. So a lot of this is weird. What I will say is his ability to be what is needed, I think is probably the most useful thing that he provides. And in game, 3, he was just in pass mode. You know, he's attacking closeouts and driving and dishing to that dump off pass to the dunker spot. He is, keeping it moving around the arc to reverse the ball to the weak side to find a shooter. He knows that him scoring is not going to be a good result for their offense, and he knows that obviously defensively that's not why he's out there. But if he can get a defensive rebound and hit the outlet pass, if he can, beat the defensive rotation with a nice high IQ ball reversal, if he can, find a timely offensive rebound put back, like it's just how can I impact the game for the 20 to 25 minutes that I'm out here in order to execute what's being asked and like you said, punish what the Knicks are. And he's been doing that. And I think, we wanted to talk about a little bit too, kind of what this is the Heat's superpower, right? This is the Heat's cheat code, the ability that they have to find these guys and plug them into exactly the role that's going to make sense for them to beat the opponent that they are facing. And that's why Eric Spoelstra gets so much respect, and that's why this organization gets so much respect. And so it's kind of funny to think of Kevin Love in the same way we think of all of their undrafted free agents and, scrap heap guys. But for all intents and purposes, Kevin Love was a scrap heap guy this year. And they said, well, he obviously has talent. He fits what we do. Let's go ahead and get him. And they're figuring it all out.
They're going to win this series.
Yeah.
I feel pretty sure.
It might not be close.
I just think they're better. This is, like, if there was a coaching gap in round 1 between Tibbs and JB Bickerstaff, that is now entirely flipped, which, like, isn't really a surprise. But Spo is just hitting every button. They have the right guy stepping up. One of the things that also really mattered was the Knicks had this huge offensive rebounding advantage in round 1. In game 3, they were still above average. But, like, they didn't kill you on the offensive glass in that way. They didn't, like, wreck the game in that way. And, like, the Heat, meanwhile, were killer on the offensive glass. Yeah. The Heat have just, like, identified what the Knicks are and said, we will beat you at this. And we know how to do it. And we trust our guys to go in and execute these game plans. It is just, like, so drilled down and specific. Brendan, I'm doing an episode on Monday on Locked On Cavs with my co-host Evan Dammerel about, like, things the Cavs can learn from the teams left in the playoffs. I'm going to talk about Devin Booker because I can't help myself about, like, how he plays versus how Donovan Mitchell plays is another thing I've texted you a fair amount about. the other thing is just like look at how the Knicks have played against the Heat versus how they played against the Cavs. That is game planning, that is toughness, that is personnel. But all of those things, it's just like this is going to get them to a conference finals. I don't think they're going to beat whoever gets out of that other series, probably Boston at this point. But they're probably going to like take it to 6 games and make Celtics fans sweat and make that like nervy at times. Like that's just what they do. Even if this isn't the best team, even if this isn't like the highest ceiling team, they just execute these things at such an insane level that it's kind of it's just you have to tip your cap to them. And like hashtag Heat culture in that specific sense is just it is a real thing, as annoying and kind of easy to make fun of as it is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, so I think you're right to a degree that some of this has been a coaching disadvantage. I think that there's a lot of it that's just personnel. I would say, to give the coaching stuff a little bit of credit first, I do think that the Miami game plan against Jalen Brunson, or really just against the Heat or against the Knicks in general, in order to take away the comfort that Jalen Brunson was able to have in that first round, has been really good. 7 of 20 from the field in game 3, 8 assists to 0 turnovers, but they're turning him into a 3-point shooter. They're, forcing him into a lot of late clock decisions where he's not able to, really be patient in the way that Jalen Brunson wants to be patient. They're blowing up some of the initial stuff. They're making Jalen Brunson have to get the ball back after a few seconds have gone off. And so a lot of that's good. And then it's forcing kickouts to a lot of their shooters. And I think that's one of the other things that he'd always do well, which is they're going to pinpoint exactly what's the best thing that we can make the series hinge on, and we're going to make it hinge on that, right? And it's like, yeah, the Knicks spot-up shooters making shots, we will live with. And you look at Julius Randle, Josh Hart, and RJ Barrett, the 3 guys in the starting lineup who took the most, that's 4 of 18 combined for those 3 guys, right? And then Quickly and Grimes and Toppin also missing, so they end up at 8 of 40, right? So it's some of that stuff, but I think some of it's personnel too, and I just think, conversation for after the series is over for sure, but I think that there's going to have to be a pretty long contemplation in that New York front office about if Julius Randle should be on the team next year. If for where they are now, the steps forward that their young role players have taken and how good Jalen Brunson has been, if he is the right guy to continue to take them where they're going. You don't want to judge a guy injured. I understand that's a factor, but he's now had 2 playoff runs where he just has not made a very high impact on either end of the floor. And so they're a second-round team. And if they want to treat themselves like that and make decisions accordingly, I think Randle might be the guy to go, because that's the outlet, right? That's the ball's in his hands. He needs to be able to make something happen. And a lot of the time, that's just a contested jumper.
There's some clips of Randle's effort that I've seen in watching the game that I was just like, oh boy. Not great from Julius Randle.
I mean, if you're going to be a negative defender, which I think in most cases he is, outside of just sort of one-on-one in the post, you've got to do more on offense, and he's not doing that either. So -6 in 38 minutes, and there you go.
Tough. All right, let's move on to Suns Nuggets 2-1. Game 4 Sunday in Phoenix. Maybe go back to Celebrity Row. I think Emma Stone should be at this game just to get this rolling.
I should have said Nathan Fielder. His energy and some of these courtside. He's really more of a baseball guy, but wherever he shows up and he just has the straight face, like resting bitch face type of thing going, it's iconic. But I'm good with my crew. Which one he would have been a he's a backup.
Are you a Succession watcher?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so which one of the Roy children would you want to come?
The actual Roy children or the actors?
We'll answer it both ways.
So the
actors, my
actors
answer's the same for both because I'm a weirdo.
Okay, the actor is Sarah Snook without a question, because she seems like the
that's actually
most fun person ever. If you look at any of the behind the scenes clips,
that's true. No, that's the right answer.
From the character standpoint, it's Connor. I would just love to see him in an NBA game environment and just sort of trying to schmooze, but also not doing it correctly and just being completely out of his element as an uptight weirdo white dude in the middle of an NBA game.
Just trying to get Maddie Ishbia to donate lots of money to his campaign.
But asking him during play and just not getting it, There's like a timeout going on, and he walks over. It would be great. What was your answer going to be?
So I'm changing it because the Sarah Snook in real life one is the right answer. But I'm taking. I think Jeremy Strong is like my favorite actor to watch do anything right now, and like that guy just like fascinates me. And Kendall Roy also fascinates me. I also just can't imagine like Roman Roy in like courtside seats and behaving himself.
Yeah, that makes me incredibly uncomfortable to think about. So that's why he didn't get the vote.
Yeah. Just imagine like him like ending up next to like Kim K, like a Laker game.
Yeah, just the shiftiness and like general explosive possibilities of Roman at any given point.
Roman
would make my skin crawl.
Roman and Kyrie Irving in the same building would just be like some stuff that would happen. I'm sure Roman and Dillon Brooks in the same building. Let's go.
Kyrie might end up on the presidential ticket if Roman had a shot with him. 10 minutes, private conversation, some funders set up.
All right. That's true. Yeah. All right. So Suns Nuggets. Let's talk about Devin Booker because Brendan, he's the best player in the Suns.
Mm-hmm.
He is. Like he's been the best player in the playoffs. I understand it's KD, but like Booker is dictating this team. He has ascended into this point guard role now with Chris Paul out. I think, frankly, also Cam Payne's willingness to play just a little faster than Chris Paul was helpful. I think Booker's experience being a point guard in his career probably was useful in this. They attacked and attacked and attacked. And I think if there's a hope for them in the series, and I don't, Game 4 we'll say a lot about that. 3-1 versus 2-2 is a whole different thing. I think like what the angles he gets at and the way he sliced them up in Game 2 would really give me hope for the Suns offense just really working itself out going forward. That to me more than anything else was really indicative. But Booker is how he is used, how he's willing to play. The combination of those two things is just it's the blueprint for everything they are to me when I watch them. I've been blown away by Booker and really dialing in on him these playoffs and really frankly getting to talk to you more about this stuff than I think I ever. My appreciation of Devin Booker has gone from like this guy's really good to like I'm pretty kind of all in on Devin Booker at this point. That's where I'm at.
Is he a top 5 player in the NBA?
Let's do the list. Okay, so if this and it's Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid are there, right?
Well, who's your number 1 right now? Based on where we are, it's a snapshot. I think a lot will be said about the rest of the postseason for us to be able to really give that answer because we're in the middle of the second round. It's a little bit of a weird time to do this. But if I asked you right now, if some random person asked you, who do you think the best player in the NBA is, what would your gut instinct be?
Giannis.
Yeah. So Giannis is, I think, most people's answer. I really have to say that the way that, especially the fourth quarter of that Game 5 went to me,
for sure.
I think that mattered. Like, he was like 1 of 12, and he was taking awful shots. He didn't want to get to the free throw line, and I understand all the injury stuff and whatever, but that affects it to me. The more that I just like try to think about what player is impacting things at the absolute highest level the most consistently to lead to the most team success, I really come back to Curry. Like it's at least a 1A, 1B for me between those two guys. So I know he just had a bad Game 3 too. So, not the best timing there, but that's my 1 and 2 in some order. And then I probably go Jokic after those 3. I would have said Durant like a year and a half ago. But he's now had 2 postseasons where he's not really lived up to that. So anyway, I think Booker is in the conversation. I kind of think once you throw Embiid in there, you throw who else are we forgetting? I mean, Durant, Anthony Davis. I guess those guys are both in there.
I'm still putting like LeBron. Like he just is in that discussion as long as he's around. Like he just is.
I don't think he's a top 5 player. He's a top. Maybe he's a top 10 guy. I'm not saying you're wrong. He's not on my list.
Yeah, I just like this is. I just will put him in there. I think Booker's closer than I think maybe like we discussed publicly. That has been kind of dictated with him to date. I think if he had extrapolated what he did over the 50-something games that he played, like it'd be him and Shea first team All NBA.
Yeah.
to me.
Booker to me it can be boiled down as simply to the guy I just mentioned. He has been the genuine, not just because Durant has struggled, he has been the best player on a team that has Kevin Durant on it, right? Like they have 5 playoff wins, almost all of them directly because Devin Booker was the best player on the court. And I don't want to say he doesn't have a weakness, but I'm also probably a little too keyed into those weaknesses because I've watched almost every single game he's ever played, I think his handle, especially with his left hand, is a little bit weak in traffic. I feel like he does make some bad decisions at times. He is a very good defender overall, I think, at this point. A good defender, but I think most of that comes on the ball and making, game plan reads. I think off the ball, he can still get fried a little bit. He can get a little bit in his head with the officials. But I also think it's fair to kind of judge him at that level now too, because look, he's played himself up to being that level of granular, right? Like he doesn't get to have the up and coming guy now. I think he's proving like the level of conversation we're at with Devin Booker now is, can he be the best player on a team that wins a championship? And in 2021, it was a little bit weird. It was a balanced team. It was Chris Paul being much better than he is now, and DeAndre Ayton playing at a higher level, and a lot of great role players. Now it's really Booker and Durant, but more so Booker. And I mean, he's answered that. The answer has been yes so far, that he can be the best guy on a team that makes it a series with 2 of the best teams in the West.
Really curious to see going forward, like how they decide to kind of decide the point guard situation next to Booker, because you could go in a lot of different ways with that, but that feels like such a swing piece, and obviously what they do with Ayton could have some kind of thing, and then what happens with Chris Paul obviously will have a big say. And he is he is just a ridiculous basketball player, man. Like that guy is just. I'm just so impressed at Brendan, maybe this is a question you can answer better than I can from someone who's not covering the team, going to media stuff, all that things. Is the way that they use him in terms of coming off of screens to get him going like downhill in like some of the really tight actions they run with like a screen and a roll in the middle of the floor where he's kind of like maneuvering in the paint or getting a midi, and his willingness to like come off of a screen off ball and spot up, do all this stuff. Is that something of how he wants to play, or is that how the Suns have decided this is how we're best going to use? Like, what is like the marriage between those two things with Booker?
It's absolutely the way that he wants to play, and that was one of the notes that I had for us to talk about too. I think that there is such a bravado. Bravado is not the right word because that kind of seems like showmanship. There is such a confidence to the style that he's chosen to develop himself into, right? Like there's a version of Devin Booker that that could make a ton of money, could be a hugely impactful player on a great team in like a
Donovan Mitchell.
Like a supercharged. Well, no, I mean, I think there's a different type of confidence with how Donovan Mitchell plays. The type of guy that I was thinking of is Klay Thompson, right? Or a player like that, right? Like,
oh, yeah.
I think that there's a version of Book, and that's
okay.
kind of the type of guy that he was compared to when he came out, because he was a 6th man at Kentucky. He was a late lottery pick. And, you could make a max deal and be on a great team, be really, wealthy and, still get to date your Jenners and get your brand deals and a Nike shoe and whatever doing that. He has committed to this 3-level scoring game, emphasizing the second level, which almost nobody in the league does. Everything flows from his threat to pull up on a dime and make the mid-range shot to commit. Like the guy that I think of with this, Chris, is actually DeMar DeRozan. Because when DeMar DeRozan went to when he went to San Antonio, we really got to see like this second era of DeMar, and obviously he's kept that going in Chicago. But it was like, wow, he has this maybe the best footwork in the NBA. Kevin O'Connor wrote a big piece about him once upon a time with kind of making that claim. The playmaking ability that he was able to flash when he didn't have, quite so many other talented players around him, and he wasn't trying to be on a championship team, and he could really just sort of spread his wings. But that was like early 30s DeMar DeRozan after a decade in the NBA. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is Devin Booker after, a long time in the NBA at this point. But there was a concerted commitment to doing that because he felt like that was going to be the best way for him to affect the game. And so, yeah, I mean, when Monty Williams got here and when Chris Paul got here, they both lauded him for he wants to do that. He doesn't want to be a guy who develops on a bad team with the ball in his hands for as long as he can and then eventually cracks into the playoffs and, sees what he can do. Like, he wanted to bring talent in so that he could play off of it. The incredible thing we're watching is he did that. They got Kevin Durant, but he is blown up to the point where there's no better choice but to put the ball in his hands. And not to nitpick something you said, but you mentioned that he's become this point guard with Chris Paul out. No, he became this point guard with Chris Paul in. And it was the best option for their team. But I'm not just saying it to correct you. I'm saying it to emphasize that's crazy. He's a better point guard than Chris Paul right now, and he's a better one-on-one shot creator than Kevin Durant. I mean, what the hell? That's insanity for a dude who, again, could have just been Klay Thompson.
Yeah, if they win the series and they come back, it's going to be because of him.
Do you think they do?
It's going to... No, but I mean, I picked them to make the finals, coming out of the West, coming into the playoffs, and a lot of that was about Durant, but a lot of that was also about Booker. It's not impossible. If it's 2-2 going back to Denver, it's on, Mm-hmm. We're recording this before Game 4. When we record next, we'll either have a series or we won't. And if Booker comes out and has a 40-piece and Durant maybe hits some catch-and-shoot threes, Suns could be in business.
80% shooting, 47 points, no free throws in Game 3. So I completely agree with you that what he was able to do with the level of confidence he did it in Game 3. I mean, if he's buoyed by that, it is a series again. And I picked the Suns in 7. I wasn't super confident in that, but we're still on track for that type of a reality.
Also, it would help if DeAndre Ayton did something positive.
We're talking about that midweek. I want to give him one more chance in Game 4, but maybe Game 5. We'll talk after Game 5. I don't know.
Yeah, I sent you some things about the.
I think Monty Williams sent us some things with his rotation decisions. So
that he did. All right, let's wrap up. Celtics 76ers. Brendan, the Jays, Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, they're winning the series. And let's talk specifically about Jaylen Brown. He's going to get All-NBA. He's going to get the Supermax if he wants it. What I think, to me, has unlocked so much of Jaylen Brown is his handle over time. I want to shout out my guy, Nick Kamiati, who's a big Celtics fan I know. We had a conversation about this in a group text the other day. And his handle, even just from last year's finals, I think has gotten better. It is not as loose. It is not as strippable. It has unlocked his driving game to this level that I think really makes him really hard to guard in the half court, really makes him hard to guard against teams that don't have a bunch of good wing defenders. And Philly isn't a team loaded with wing defenders. There's room and opportunity for Brown to attack. This obviously, when he was really young, this was an issue with his game. It was an issue in the finals last year. It has gotten better and better and better. He's been great, and he at times feels like the hammer. Tatum was the hammer in Game 3, more so than Brown to me. But there's been times this year, obviously, where Brown, I think, buoyed by his handle more than anything else, has really been the hammer for Boston when they've needed it. I think, they won the game in Philly where Embiid got his MVP. They handled it pretty well. Harden again did not play well. We'll talk about him midweek as well. He also gets another chance to resurrect a little bit here. But if I'm Boston, I feel really great right now, and it's in large part it's because of the Jays to me. It's all about the Jays.
So let's keep on Brown. His turnover rate is higher in this playoffs than it was last year, and in the regular season, It was about the same. A little bit of a higher usage in both cases, so it evens out a bit. But I guess I look at that and I don't necessarily see being cleaner with the basketball. The one thing, because I saw your note in there before we hit record and I was thinking about it a little bit because I am curious. I think it's an interesting conversation because I think I feel him being more impactful. I mean, his true shooting percentage is way up. He's been, I would say, a bigger threat overall. The best I could kind of wrap my mind around what would explain it, because I don't watch the Celtics enough to necessarily feel like I can see a dramatic difference in his handle, although, again, if you want to jump in, feel free. The best thing I could come up with is I almost feel like him choosing to try to pass less has helped.
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think it's a little bit of both, right? Like, so cleaning the glass in the playoffs right now. In the regular season, he had his best year in the short mid, so in that 4 to 14 foot range at 45%. That was his best number since his 1920 season. He's at 47% on long mid rangers. Like, so he's killing there. In the playoffs this year, Brendan, he's at 54% on short mid range attempts. Not as good on the long mids at 32%, so that's really fallen off. But he's getting into that 4 to 14 foot range, and I think like he gets there, and he's big and he's strong, and he's able to get off shots there now. And like that was not the case for chunks of his career. Like that was just not always a thing he really could rely on. He's at 67% at the rim in the playoffs. That's a 3% bump off of last year as well. His effective field goal percentage is like above 60% in these playoffs, and it's 6% above where it was at in the regular season, when he had a really good regular season. I think it is a strength, and I think it is looking for shots. He's not the cleanest passer, right? Like, he's not going to be this guy that whips around these, like, insane kind of no-look passes or, like, is an elite creator in that way. Like, I think that's where, like, if he was, like, a number one on a great team, I would wonder what that looks like, because I don't know, like, how that exactly translates one-to-one when you don't have that plus creation ability. Like, if he had to play point guard for Boston, I don't know if that's working, right? Like, I don't know if he had to do prolonged stretches of creation for others. I don't know exactly what that looks like in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. But what he can do is, like, with I think a handle that is not perfect but is good enough. When he used to dribble off his leg, a chunk, fair amount.
Yeah.
And he can get to his spots, and he can hit these shots because he has the strength. I think that has just unlocked a level of his offensive game that was not there. And it makes, when you have two wings like that, as much as sometimes they're late game offense creators and all of that, it gives them a lot more. I think you can kind of bank on it, and that feels real to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, and I think it's a great player development lesson, and I've wanted to have this conversation on a bunch of different guys. It's just a lot of the players that it comes to mind with aren't always flashy enough that we've been able to talk about them on the show, but maybe during the draft and some of that stuff, it's a good chance to dip in. But I think it applies to Jaylen Brown. The number one thing I feel like we forget about watching players over the course of their careers get better is 99% of the time, that's going to come from doing what they're great at better, not adding things, suddenly becoming very good at things that they were not good at previously. It's going to be what's great about Jaylen Brown. The dude played the 4 at Cal, right? He's like a 6'6" 4.
Yeah.
What's great about Jaylen Brown? He is overpowering. He's a freak athlete, and he, has enough touch and IQ and whatever with the ball in his hands to get to the basket and finish. That's basically what made him special from the jump on the offensive end. This idea that he was going to become some sort of spraying, pick and roll passer, I don't think anyone thought that, but there's a part of, analysis of these guys that sometimes is like, well, if he could just this and that, it's like, no, what he's going to do is keep being amazing at the stuff that he's amazing at and figure out how to use that to his advantage. So basically what it feels like he's done is, I'm not going to do as much of the stuff I'm bad at because now my game has grown to the point where I can do the stuff I'm great at an even higher level and more consistently and get to it more easily and this and that. And I've seen how teams want to try to stop me in the playoffs. I know what I'm going to do to counter that and whatever. I'm going to attack early in the clock. I'm going to, the coaching staff is putting him in spots to succeed. I'm sure that maybe we're not picking up on every single time compared to 5 years ago when we don't always remember that stuff. But that's just a cool part of I think the NBA and how guys get better that Brown is a great example of. I think RJ Barrett is another one of those we could talk about at some point. But yeah, that's to me what's really special about him. Do you feel like these guys are better enough to get over the hump this year? Like, do you feel better about them midway through the second round than maybe you did last year?
No, I feel about the same.
Yeah, same.
I don't trust the coaching as much, and the late game offense is still just like often a bungle. So I think, we can have this conversation later because, again, we're at the end of the show and there's a game that's going to happen. But maybe I think they'll win this series, so, we'll have a conversation in the conference finals and whatnot. The interesting thing about this team to me is the guards are better, but the bigs are worse than last year. And so I don't know how that evens out. I think it's going to be very matchup dependent.
I think there's a version where they could be very equal. I mean, they took the Warriors to 6 games anyway. They had a 2-1 lead on them. It took an all-time performance from Curry to take them down. This was not like a failure last year by any means, but I think there's a version where they could be about the same and they just win the title anyway. There's nothing wrong with being close to your peak in your mid-20s. That's sort of what's supposed to happen, and then the team around you just has to get better, and you have to kind of figure things out. But I think Brown has impressed me more in his evolution this year than maybe Tatum has. I feel like Tatum has had a very similar season to last year. There's nothing wrong with that either. Dude got MVP votes. But I don't know. The weird thing about the Celtics is it doesn't feel like there's necessarily one thing about their greatness that happens every night. And that's just a tough spot to be in.
Their biggest strength to me is that they've built a pretty great roster.
Mm-hmm. I mean, probably the best roster in the NBA, right?
Right, and you look at what they have. They have all these big guards that can switch and defend. They have 2 really good wings. When he's healthy, they have really good center play with Rob Williams and Horford. They even have they can go to Hauser if they need to for certain stretches. Like, they have options. And there's not weak spots in switching. You're gonna hunt Horford a little bit, but you don't. That's not like hunting the worst center in the league or anything like that. It's still gonna be a challenge. He's gonna contest. He's gonna know what to do. The roster is just rock solid everywhere, and to me, that kind of structural strength probably is what carries them more than some of the kind of helps them work through some of the issues that we're kind of identifying here, I think.
Yeah, I think Horford is probably the number one guy to watch there as they go forward. I think he's been noticeably less impactful this year on both ends, and that happens when you're in your late 30s. But Robert Williams is unreliable for obvious reasons, and so that could be the thing. If you're looking forward, it's does Denver challenge them there if that's the finals matchup? Does Embiid have a otherworldly performance the rest of the series? I don't think that's out of the question. That would be sort of if that were to happen, I wouldn't be surprised given what we've seen from Horford. But it's a fairly small weakness, all things considered. It's they have answers, they're just not perfect answers. Some teams don't have any answers for stuff. They have answers for everything.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. All right, any final thoughts, Brendan? Any last things you want to get off your chest before we wrap this up?
No. Wish me luck with my sanity in Phoenix for Game 4.
Yes. All right, we're going to end there. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. Please subscribe, rate, review on your podcast platform of choice if you've not already. Thanks again to Jake Stevens and Dylan Heiser for producing. And if you haven't already checked it out, go back in the feed, go back on the YouTube channel. Brendan interviewed Bulls guard Alex Caruso. It's a great interview. You should go check that out if you have not already. I believe it's available as a standalone video if you want to just check out Brendan chatting with AC. Until next time, this has been the Just Basketball Show for Monday, May 8th, or Sunday, May 7th, depending on where you're listening to this. Enjoy the hoops. They're probably going to be pretty good.